In 1947, a team of Navy engineers opened a logbook, taped a dead moth to the page, and wrote, "First actual case of bug being found." That moth is still preserved today, and the word it inspired is now used billions of times a day by programmers around the world. To understand why a moth in a logbook matters, you need to picture what computing looked like in the 1940s. These were not machines you carried in your pocket. The Harvard Mark II, running in Dahlgren, Virginia in 1947, weighed thousands of pounds and filled entire rooms. It operated using electromechanical relays, physical switches that opened and closed thousands of times per second to process calculations. The people who ran these machines were not called programmers yet. Many were mathematicians, often women, hired by the U.S. Navy to crunch ballistics tables and navigation data. When something went wrong, and things went wrong constantly, you did not just restart the program. You physically inspected the machine, component by component, looking for the failure. A misbehaving machine meant something had gone wrong in the hardware itself. The engineers who worked these floors had to be part mathematician, part mechanic. And that combination of precision and hands-on troubleshooting created the culture in which our word would take root. Origin story. 3 men. The story of the software bug runs through one of the most remarkable figures in computing history, Grace Murray Hopper. Hopper was a mathematician from New York who joined the Navy Reserve during World War II and was assigned to the Bureau of Ordnance Computation Project at Harvard University. She worked on the Mark I and later the Mark II computers under the direction of Howard Aiken, a Harvard professor who had partnered with IBM to build some of the earliest large-scale computing machines in the country. Hopper was sharp, relentless, and later became famous for helping develop some of the first compiler programs, software that could translate human-readable instructions into machine code. But in the summer of 1947, she and her team were doing something much more mundane, debugging the Mark II at the Naval Weapons Laboratory in Dahlgren, Virginia. On September 9, 1947, the machine started producing errors. The team traced the problem to panel F, relay 70. When they looked inside, they found a moth. It had gotten into the relay, physically preventing it from closing properly, and was causing the machine to malfunction. One of the team members, the log does not specify exactly who, removed the moth, taped it to the page of the official Navy logbook, and wrote the now famous annotation, "First actual case of bug being found." That logbook is now held at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. You can look it up. The moth is still there. But here is what makes this story genuinely interesting from a language perspective. The word bug, to mean a fault or malfunction, did not begin with that moth. The team wrote first actual case of bug being found, not first time we used this word. They were already using the word. The moth was a joke, a visual pun on a term that engineers had been using informally for decades. Thomas Edison used the word bug to describe faults in his electrical systems as early as 1878. In a letter to Theodore Puskas, Edison wrote that it took him a week to find the bugs, as he called them, in his telegraph repeater. The word was already floating around engineering culture, a loose, informal term for any gremlin hiding in your system that was causing unexpected failures. Where did that usage come from? That part is genuinely murky. The word bug in English goes back centuries as a term for insects and small creatures, but also for imaginary frightening things, bogeymen, specters, things that go wrong in the dark. There is a Middle English word bug that meant a scarecrow or a terrifying apparition. The connection between something small and troublesome hiding inside a machine and a creeping insect you cannot easily see seems to have developed organically in 19th century engineering slang, with no single inventor and no clean origin date on record. What Grace Hopper's team did in 1947 was not coin the term. They crystallized it. They gave it a physical, literal, photographic anchor. And when Hopper later told the story publicly, which she did many times with characteristic wit, she helped cement bug as the standard word for software errors in the growing computing community of the 1950s and 60s. The misconception, 90s. The misconception here is one of the most understandable in the history of language. People hear the story and conclude that Grace Hopper's team invented the term bug for computer errors, that the moth was the origin. It is a clean story, a satisfying story, and it is wrong. The logbook entry says, first actual case of bug being found, not first time anyone called it a bug. That phrasing only makes sense if the word was already in common use. It reads like a punchline, not a definition. Edison's 1878 letter predates the moth by nearly 70 years. And there are other documented uses of bug, meaning a mechanical fault in various engineering contexts throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s. The word was already alive in technical culture long before anyone built a relay computer. What the 1947 incident did was give the word staying power in the specific context of computing. It became a touchstone story, repeated at conferences and in textbooks. The moth became the mascot of a word that was already doing the job. Modern echoes, 90s. Today, the word bug is so embedded in software culture that entire industries are built around it. Bug trackers, bug bounties, bug reports. These are formal, professional, multi-billion-dollar systems. Companies like Google and Microsoft run bug bounty programs that pay security researchers tens of thousands of dollars to find vulnerabilities. The word has moved from informal engineering slang to legal and financial documentation. The process of fixing bugs is called debugging, and that term has also escaped into general language. You debug a process, you debug a relationship, you debug a business strategy. The metaphor of finding the hidden fault, isolating it, and removing it has become one of the defining mental models of the modern world, borrowed almost entirely from the image of engineers peering into machinery looking for the thing that does not belong. And somewhere at the Smithsonian, a moth is still taped to a page, doing its small, permanent job. Deeper connections. Tummentorpen, bug, is a genuinely strange word in English because it carries two almost opposite emotional registers. In one context, it means something trivial, a small insect, a minor glitch, a little problem. In another, it carries real menace. A bugged room means you are being surveilled. A bug in a nuclear launch system is not trivial at all. The word stretches across this range without breaking. The surveillance meaning, where a bug is a hidden listening device, developed separately in the 20th century, probably influenced by the same core image, something small, hidden, and unwanted, operating without your knowledge. The CIA and FBI were using bug for listening devices by at least the 1940s, running parallel to its engineering usage. Both meanings share that same root feeling. A small, concealed thing causing damage or gathering information in a way you cannot easily detect. Related to all of this is the verb to debug, which entered formal computing documentation by the early 1950s. Hopper herself used it in writing. From there, it spread into adjacent fields, electronics, aerospace, eventually management and psychology. The word debugger, meaning a software tool that helps identify errors, is now part of every programming language ecosystem on Earth. There's also a cultural dimension worth noting. The fact that the canonical first bug was found by a team that included women at a time when women were systematized.